What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. and Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today, we're talking the latest episode of WWE Break It Down featuring Sheamus. And now, I don't know if this is the shortest episode they've ever done, but it was definitely among them, clocking it at almost 10 minutes and 20 seconds. I think 9 minutes maybe and 50 seconds. It was a pretty short episode. A good one where he breaks down a handful of matches, but definitely a short one. The first match that he looks at is his debut from almost 11 years ago, almost exactly, from the June 30th, 2009 edition of WWE ECW, facing a local jobber named Oliver John. It obviously was his debut match. He recalled being brought into Vince's office that same night, being told that he'd be making his debut on the main roster that night on ECW. I remember that very clearly. I mean, all the episodes of the WWE ECW show were on the network. You can rewatch it if you wanted to. But I think that was the same night that Abraham Washington had debuted. Remember that guy? The same guy that made a Kobe joke? The Colorado hotel room joke, which got him fired a couple of months later, not even. So I think he debuted that night. Yoshitatsu debuted that night, beating, I want to say, Shelton Benjamin on the show. They had the new Superstar Initiative, which had actually brought in a handful of top talent. Earlier on, people like, John Morrison had been repackaged. CM Punk was another one. By the end, not so much. This was when the brand was kind of on its way out. But Sheamus obviously became a top star. Yoshitatsu, not so much. Washington had been fired within a couple of years. Tyler Rex, I think, was gone even before that. Tyler Rex, I think, was the other guy that debuted on this episode in like a backstage segment with Zack Ryder. But anyway, so we talked about for his debut, he wanted to bring something different. With Finlay over on SmackDown, I think he had said something about how he had been going to an Irish-speaking school for since he was 2 or 4 years old or something like that, which is crazy. So he wanted to speak Galga, something like that. I don't know if he meant Gaelic. I'm not sure if that's the exact same thing. I assume it is, but yeah, he spoke Gaelic or something along those lines in his opening promo upon his making his debut. He already looked different, so he already had that down pat. He called Oliver John awesome. He said he was an awesome opponent. He was so fluid in the ring, you could have thought that he was on the main roster, so he was lucky to get him for his debut match. But he knew that he had to make an impact for his debut. And he really got to mix it up with a ton of people early on. Everyone from John Cena to John Morrison, Triple H at WrestleMania, which I'll get to in a moment. But really a lot of people in a very short span of time. And for most of those matches, he said, he was flying off the seat of his pants. From there, they talk about the Triple H Extreme Rules 2010 Street Fight. Now, this was the WrestleMania rematch. They had a match at WrestleMania 26 that was actually pretty good. Sheamus lost, of course, which he shouldn't have, but whatever. Triple H at that point was coming to an end of his full-time schedule as an in-ring competitor before transitioning into an office role soon after this. I think he was injured, and then he had started to take up an office role, so Triple H was gone for a while. I remember reading reports 10 years ago. It's crazy. I didn't think it's been a decade since this happened. But I remember reading reports at that point indicating that Triple H would be back for SummerSlam. He faced, Sheamus for the WWE Championship. Obviously, they went in a different direction with Randy Orton instead, which was the smarter call, because Orton winning the WWE title, being the hot babyface that he was at that point, was absolutely the right decision to make. But Triple H, he was still working a full-time schedule by this point, and he was on Raw. I think he had one of his final Raw matches at that point as well. But Sheamus said that he loved their street fight. He loved the street fight they had. He put him out with 3 bro kicks, including attacking him earlier on in the evening. So they really wanted to protect Triple H in defeat here by having him get ambushed twice backstage, maybe more, and then taking 3 bro kicks at the feet of Sheamus here to give Sheamus the victory. But hey, you know what? At least he put Sheamus over on the way out. That's all I can really ask for. Sheamus called it really cool, and he said that Triple H, he gives him a lot of credit because Triple H gave him a lot of legitimacy. There's a lot of people that show up, have a big debut or a big moment, and then flounder from there. But not Sheamus. Not Sheamus. That made a statement. That win that night made a statement that he'd be around for a very long time, which he has been. The next match we look at is the 2 out of 3 falls match for the World Heavyweight Championship with Daniel Bryan from Extreme Rules 2012. He said it was awesome. It was amazing. One of his favorite matches, and how could it not be? Him and Bryan, for as much as I joke now about how, it's a feud that's been done to death, which it has been, they always work well together. I've never seen a bad match between Sheamus and Daniel Bryan. Now, again, they could maybe not do the feud as much as they have in the last 10 years, but the matches they have had have always been very good. This was easily the best of the bunch. In Chicago, at Extreme Rules, championship on the line, Sheamus brought up all the circumstances behind the contest about how Bryan was really starting to get sympathy for what happened at WrestleMania 28 right before this. People started to have emotion for Daniel Bryan, getting invested in the whole yes chant and everything else. And of course, you put them in Chicago, the people were into it. Again, he said it was amazing, it was awesome. They really beat the crap out of each other that night. And they both had aggressive styles, so it meshed very, very well. And he offers a lot of praise for Daniel Bryan here, saying that Daniel Bryan proves that you don't have to be tall or muscular or strong or whatever to be a successful superstar, sports entertainer, wrestler, whatever. All you got to do is have that intensity that Daniel Bryan has. And if you do, people will believe everything that he does. Because he can legitimately take your head off, which he almost did with a few of those kicks to Sheamus during this match. They then get into the TLC match that Sheamus had with Roman Reigns at the TLC 2015 pay-per-view for the WWE, at that point, the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. I was in attendance for this match. This was in Boston at the Garden. It was a fun night. I remember it was right before Christmas, my final week of I think junior year or whatever, before I got out for the semester. My final week, school year of 2015. It was a great show. I don't remember liking this match. I'm honestly, it bums me out that they show this match and not the rematch. I mean, this was a good match too. I guess it was alright. I have seen it back since then. It was decent. But I thought it was fucking riddled with interference. The crowd could not have given two shits, and they really beat the shit out of each other here. But one, the match had no business being a TLC match, because they proved the next night you don't need to have all the smoke and mirrors to make it a good match. They had a standard one-on-one match the next night, which, yeah, that also had interference, but it worked a lot better. The crowd was hotter. In Boston, I don't know, just either we were a terrible crowd or, I don't know, the show started and we were really, really hot. But by the main event, no one gave a fuck about Sheamus. No one gave a fuck about Roman Reigns. No one gave a fuck about this match. And again, I was probably a little too harsh on it at the time. It wasn't a terrible match, because again, they really put their bodies through absolute hell in this match. But Sheamus really, really seemed to like it. I'm sure they showed this one and not the rematch, because Sheamus actually won this match. But he said it was awesome for a lot of reasons. He said that people hated Sheamus more than Reigns at that point, which is true, which is why the Roman Reigns title change the next night on Raw worked as well as it did, because it's not like he was beating someone, like, for example, when Roman first won the championship at Survivor Series against Dean Ambrose, people would want Dean to win more than Roman. There was no reason to have Roman win that night. And yeah, they took the championship right off of him with the Sheamus cash-in, but it just didn't really work. If that was Dean Ambrose, it would have meant a lot more. Obviously, Ambrose went on to cash in a contract of his own less than a year later, so he ended up getting his moment. But for that night, it made for a terrible finish to a terrible show. And Sheamus did have, legitimate heat. The whole League of Nations faction sucked. It had a potential, but it was booked so terribly. And all the members in that faction have since admitted, yeah, the only reason why we were put together was to, put over Roman Reigns. And I think Barrett said recently it was a Jamie Noble idea. I think, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, he said that people hated him with a mohawk when he came back with a mohawk the night after WrestleMania 31. Roman Reigns was getting a lot of flack for winning the Royal Rumble back in January of that same year. So Sheamus knew what it was like to be called over-pushed by the fans, which is true. Sheamus has been over-pushed at certain points. Roman Reigns, same thing. That's not their fault. It's just the company's fault for not doing a better job of crafting their story, giving them better character development. And yeah, at a certain point, it's the fault of the performer for maybe not holding up their end of the bargain. But in the case of these two superstars, I would completely disagree with that. For Sheamus, I thought he was a great heel early on before they really lost their way with him. He was being booked well, and then he would lose. He would win a match, and then he would lose a match. And it was really difficult to take the guy seriously, to the point where when he eventually won the championship, no one gave a single fuck. But as far as this match is concerned, he said they took a lot of great bumps, which they did. And he got held up by the League of Nations afterward, after successfully retaining his WWE Championship. Not one of my favorite matches, but for Sheamus, cool. The final match they look at here is the Best of 7 series, the 7th match in the Best of 7 series with Cesaro at the 2016 Clash of Champions pay-per-view. The matches were great. The whole series was awesome. I was really happy with the idea of doing a Best of 7 series. It had been years since we had seen one in WWE. But with Raw Raw was already 3 hours for a few years, but with Raw being its own brand, coming off the brand extension, it filled in television time, gave both guys something to do, meaningful, because with the championship title shot on the line, it was, easy to get invested in. And he said he always had respect for Cesaro. They were never really that close before that series of matches, though. And he said they only wrestled, I think, twice before that. And they did have 2 matches on Raw before the Best of 7 series started, but I'm not sure if he's talking about, on SmackDown. I think they had a SmackDown match in, early... Actually, no, that's a lie. That's a fucking lie, because they had a ton of matches. They had some in, 2013. They had a bunch of matches in 2014 over the United States Championship, and all of those were great, too. So they already had a ton of matches against each other before the Best of 7 series kicked off. But anyway, so... He said that they made the most of being directionless at that point. They tore the house down in Indianapolis at the Clash of Champions pay-per-view. And he said that match was all that anyone was talking about that night. And I don't really remember the pay-per-view too well. I remember the Rollins-Owens main event not being great. I remember liking Sami Zayn versus Chris Jericho. They had Bayley, Banks, and Bayley in a triple threat match. On paper, it seemed to be a pretty great card that just wasn't all that memorable, all things considered. But this was actually a very good match, and probably the best match in the entire show. I'd have to go back and look at that again. But yeah, they started teaming after the Best of 7 series wrapped up because the match ended in a no contest, a draw, whatever. So Foley was like, instead of doing a rematch or a restart, which would make the most sense, let's just put them together and give them a tag team title shot instead, which they did get. They became brothers through teaming with each other for so long. And in the beginning, he said it was about 2 individuals. But by the end, it was about the tag team. And, in closing, he talks about how he's as legit as anyone. And to really cement yourself, he says, as a main event player is something else. But yeah, as far as the Cesaro tag team goes, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would go so far as to say that the Bar is arguably one of, if not the greatest makeshift tag team in the company's history. And they've had, Miz and Morrison were kind of a makeshift tag team. They were never really supposed to be a tag team for long. They worked well together. I'm sure there's more I'm not thinking of. Like The Rock and Mankind are obviously up there as well. I'm not saying they are the greatest makeshift tag team of all time, but they're definitely in that conversation. Winning, 5 tag team titles? They were together for a long time. Had a lot of great matches with the New Day, the Bar, the Revival, having a lot of good matches over the course. No, did I say the Bar? I meant to say the Hardy Boys. They had a lot of good matches with the Hardy Boys. The Shield as well. Rollins and Jason Jordan were another team they worked well with. I'm sure there were more matches I'm not thinking of. But yeah, definitely the New Day, among others. And the Usos, they had great matches with the Usos. So yeah, definitely a great tag team. And a good episode overall of WWE Break It Down featuring the Celtic Warrior Sheamus. This episode has already well exceeded how long the actual episode of Break It Down was. This review, that is. The episode is only 10 minutes long. And my review's already gone almost 14 minutes now. But yeah, it's good. Check it out. It's a very quick and easy, simple watch. I think they air it in between stuff on the WWE Network because the episodes of Break It Down are so short. After a program ends and there's 10 minutes remaining before the top of the hour, usually they play stuff like this. So check it out right now on the WWE Network. WWE Break It Down featuring Sheamus. As for the rest of the weekend, you can check out a SmackDown review for tomorrow from tonight for the July 10th episode of the show. That should be up tomorrow. And then on Sunday should be my review of WWE Chronicle featuring Jeff Hardy, which I'm very much looking forward to. And then on Monday, I'm not really sure what's airing then. Probably I might put up something. I'm not exactly sure yet, but stay tuned for that. Be sure to be notified. Hit that little bell button to be notified every time a new video is uploaded. Like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. Be sure to find me on the socials as well in the description box down below. Have a great rest of your weekend, folks. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.